Hey addicts, welcome back to another TV show review. I'm Josh, and today we're going to be talking about the second season of Castlevania that just released last Friday. And this is a great October-themed show, and we're just getting right into it. Starting with the characters and just a little bit about the season. We still have Trevor, Sypha, and Alucard being our main protagonists, but then we get to see a few more new characters this season, particularly on Dracula's side. We get to see more of his army with Isaac and Hector, with them providing Dracula with the spawn of army that he has of undead and creatures, night creatures. And then we have his vampire side of his army, who two leaders of those that are of importance throughout the season are Godbrand, who is kind of like a Viking warrior vampire, and then we also have Carmelia, which she is presumably a pretty powerful vampire underling. Not as powerful as Draco, but still pretty high up, but she has some ulterior motives. And in this season, we just get to see more of Trevor and his band's group of going after Dracula and trying to stop him from ending basically the end of the world. I'm going to try to keep it... that's all I'm going to say of the season right now. I might go into some few things about the season and things that happen. So I'll try to give a spoiler warning if I feel like it's needed, but for the most part, I'm going to try to keep it spoiler-free. So one of the things that we get to see, a big part of the season, is in the first half, we actually get to see some backstories and a little bit more of Dracula's side of things, which I really did love. That was one of the things I wanted after watching the first season, was seeing more of Dracula, and we got that. We get to see some backstories of the Forge Masters, Hector and Isaac, and they are both really likable characters. I think Isaac is probably the best of the new characters, and I really like his arc throughout. Hector is somebody that you probably won't love as much, but he's still really interesting in both his motives and just how his arc plays out, and then leading up to the potential third season. With the other vampires, you get to see that there's some tension, not knowing exactly what Dracula's motives are, and Dracula likes to keep that close to him, and it plays a big role throughout the season. We get to see a lot of, I guess you could say, Dracula's human side, and just how that's motivating him throughout this decision that he has of genocide. One of the other things that we get to see are... I'll keep that for a little bit later because those go into a little bit of spoilers, so I'll save that for a spoiler section. Getting into the season itself, though, there was a lot of things that I thought were on par from the last season. Overall, the fights, pretty great. There's a nice steady pace. We get to see that backstory, but it's really well done, and it just makes those characters really interesting. You just want to see them and know more, and I thought all that was great. You also, like I said, get some badass fights. Definitely later on at the very end, it ends very strongly, but there were a few elements of the season that I found were maybe not as on par with the second season or with the first season. That being, in the first season there was a comedy aspect, but it was mainly grounded to Trevor and his character specifically. Maybe every once in a while you'd hear a joke pop off, but it was mainly Trevor who was doing it. And I felt that was a good balance because it was only him. And for the show and what they tackle, and then the kind of dark atmosphere they're trying to go for, it just felt more balanced in the first season. Whereas in the second season, it seems like jokes are just being thrown out all the time, which I still enjoyed the season, but there was special scenes that it kind of took me out of the moment a little bit just because it felt a little overboard. And even specifically from certain characters, it just felt a little out of place for them. Specifically with Alucard, he has a lot of back and forth with Trevor in this season, which, maybe down the line I wouldn't have mind that maybe in the first season, but in this season it just didn't feel exactly. I don't know. Like they could have toned it down and it probably would have been just fine, but it felt like they had it at a certain level that it just seemed a little off. And even in certain scenes where there's big things happening that affects all of the groups in the season, then they just kind of not ruin it, but it kind of dampers it a little bit when they end it with a joke. So that's one aspect. Another aspect is the animation kind of dips in quality a little bit throughout the season, where typically I don't focus too heavily on that, although I am more of a stickler when it comes to shows with animation than. But one of the things that is kind of really noticeable is in certain fight scenes or anything that's moving really fast, there's times where it seems a bit laggy, and at first I thought it was my connection. I just kind of wrote it off, but I was talking to Graham, who unfortunately is not here for this review, but he was saying he was having the same problems when he was watching it. So it leads me to believe that is a problem that they had in the final product, and I think it's mainly just due to them rushing the product out. But that was one of the big things I noticed. It wasn't too bad because, like I said, the visual aspect doesn't really dip. It's just like, oh, you can see that it's, kind of struggling to keep up with what's happening. But the other thing that's probably more to that is there's certain backgrounds or something that they just didn't seem to put enough polish in it. So, like I said, probably due to rushing it out, but it's just something I wanted to highlight. Probably the last thing I just wanted to say is that they added double the episodes that the last season had. Now, I think it's probably about I'd have to look back and see, but I think it's pretty close to the same duration. Because in the first season we had 4 episodes, but they were I think 45 minutes to maybe an hour. And in this season we have 8 episodes, but they're half an hour. So it's not really more content. We get the same amount, but I guess it feels a little bit more just because they seem to go through a lot more content than they do in the first season. But in reality, it's not really that much different in terms of viewing time. You can still get it through. I could have watched it in one sitting. I purposely broke it up to a couple days, but it's a really fast watch, and it's really enjoyable to sit down and watch it all because the way they break it up is really good. Now I'll get into a rating real quick, then I'll talk a little bit about the spoilers. So my rating for this, I think I'd give it. I think for this season, I have to give it a worth it. It's still really good, and I like all of the story that's played out, and the new characters, specifically the Forge Masters, were really cool, and I can't wait to see them later on. But it's not. I would say it's on par with the story and the action, but the writing and the animation just either dips or is overboard in certain areas that maybe lessens the full enjoyment when you're watching it, especially for the first time. Now, getting into my spoiler talk, I just wanted to talk a little bit about how I felt about the ending, and then also what I think is coming up for the next season. For me, the ending with... spoiler warning here. Dracula's death. It wasn't something that I was when I was going into the second season. I was like, man, I hope they don't kill off Dracula because he's really cool, and I really like the voice actor they got for him, and he just seems like he's a huge badass in this show. But they end him in a way that I think is really good. It's believable with his character, and to be honest, I don't think they could have pulled off the motivation and everything that came together for the ending as well as if they left him alive for a couple more seasons. So I understand why they decided that this was a good time to make his story end, and I thought it was really well done, and it makes sense. Now, one of the other things was the new threats. We get to see that Godbrand is dead. So Carmelia is the only vampire, or at least that we know of, that is a good high power status that is wanting or has plans of her own. And I think we're going to see probably like a 3-way battle between Carmelia, Isaac, who at this point is going to try to enact revenge for Dracula and try to make his dream a reality. And we're going to see him with his own army, and then we'll probably have, Trevor and Sypha roaming around, being in the mix of that. They can go a lot of routes. I think after this season, they might follow more of the structure of the games a little bit. Not to a T, because some of the older stuff doesn't have too much story. But I'm curious. I'm not curious. I'm excited to see where they're going to go, what the pacing is going to be like. I feel like this is something that it would be good, and it would probably pay off if they didn't touch on them for maybe a season. Just have some exploring of Trevor and Sypha dealing with maybe some of the other monsters and creatures of the night that are out there, and then we get maybe some more development of Alucard. At the moment where it stands, I don't think they're going to set him up as a villain, but I think it has potential that they could potentially do that after all the other threats are dealt with, if they wanted to. But right now, I don't think it really makes sense for them to do that. So I think if we get more development for them, take a break, see a season where it's that, maybe some scheming on the other people's side, and then maybe the season after that, we get another doomsday scenario. But that's just what I see as of right now. We'll have to wait. As of right now, I don't think there's a date for the third season, or if it's even been that they are going to do one. But I would assume they are, so we're going to stay tuned for that. But as always, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And we're going to have some more scary stuff on your way. This should be releasing the 29th, so that means tomorrow is Halloween, and we should have our review, more of like a discussion of 2018's John Carpenter Halloween sequel. So anyway, that'll be it for this video, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. Later, addicts.